positivity or looking for encouragement. To me, a Brinson aims to educate you, to give you the push to believe, to have the mindset for success. Mindset for success. To have the mindset for success. To have the mindset for success.
Welcome to the Mindset for Success Show. I'm Temia Brinson, your host, and our guest today is Thomas Ware. He is a gospel music artist and also the pastor of the Uncommon Faith Center. And we have Alyssa Hogan. She is the CEO of several businesses, a speaker, and business coach. So, Thomas and Alyssa, welcome to the show.
Oh,
So today we're going to talk about the handling of Haitian migrants. And to give you an overview of what occurred about a week or so ago, reports said that there were approximately 15,000 Haitian migrants at the Texas border, and they all were under this one bridge. And a photographer captured the Border Patrol agent on horseback with what appears to be whips or some type of rope in the hands and that were aimed at the migrants. So this photograph, it created outrage because simply because of the imagery and all that it suggests. Okay, so eventually the migrants, they were processed and moved out, deported. But let's discuss the immigration policy. So Thomas, let me start with you. Why isn't there a process? I mean, there's a process, but it's insufficient. So why isn't there a process that can handle large crowds of migrants, in an orderly fashion to where our border patrols won't feel the need to come out with horses and whips? Thomas, you want to check your mic? Okay, hold on, Thomas. Alyssa, what say you? What about you? What do you think about the process?
about the policies that they have in place.
Yeah,
Um,
in the
they make
process.
well, it's we. I mean, evidently, it's definitely ineffective. We see the results of it. It's no way that our people should be sleeping under a bridge. I don't care where they're coming from. We have never seen this from any other, even when, Mexicans are crossing over, we haven't saw pictures of them sleeping under a bridge, them being treated the way that they've treated our Haitian sisters and brothers. So definitely that policy needs to be revamped. According to Biden, he has continued the policy that Trump had in place. So, I mean, I know we're not talking about politics today, but this is a political problem also. I mean, this is political.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, all right, awesome. So one of the things, that I think that we have to realize is that sometimes we see the camera, we see the footage, and we often take on the part that actually is usually shown for footage for news. Is actually going to be the part that gets the crowd's attention. And I think what we see happening there at the border, a lot of this has been blown up without looking at the actual background of what's happening. You kind of get just a piece of it, and you kind of run with the first part that you see. We saw the reaction of Border Patrol, and I do admit that when I see what I saw, it seemed to be very harsh, and it seemed to be inhumane in so many ways. But it's kind of like, a lot of times, unless you're put in certain positions yourself, you really don't know how you would react as someone who's hired to protect the border. We have to remember that these guys they're hired for the sake of protecting their station and people from coming in, regardless of color. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, when you look at this, we have to realize that these aren't particularly, I did a little bit of research on this, and the Haitian migrants that we're seeing, this crowd it was not only Haitians that were in this crowd. This crowd actually was a crowd, a mixture of Dominicans, Venezuelans, Cubans also. We had a great amount of Haitians, but this is kind of like the situation of a perfect storm, because the Haitians that we saw are not the Haitians that were just affected by the things that happened in Haiti. What we're seeing is the Haitians who were actually those that went over to Del Rio. They had gone over for the actual Olympics, and they were there in South America for the sake of trying to get jobs. And so after those jobs did not result to what they wanted, they had to then migrate to different locations to set themselves up in a better place, and that kind of led them to head towards the U.S. border. There's a strict law in place when it comes to immigration in the U.S., and you have to actually fit certain, criteria to actually be able to be qualified as an immigrant that's let into the U.S. And that's where we find the biggest problem at, where it kind of makes it seem as if though the system's broken in so many ways.
Right.
It really isn't.
Let me speak to that, Thomas. Pause right there, because I'm noticing it's a difference, because Haiti, the country of Haiti, for example, is a poor country. And U.S. immigration policy wants you to, they prefer for you to apply ahead of time before you get to the border, before you get to the country. And, but this is a poor country. These people don't have any access to broadband or internet, or even, they don't even have supporters, sponsors to sponsor their, citizenship or asylum or what have you. And they don't have resources for that. So it's like you said, it is broken, because it seems to cater to one set group.
Well, we have to realize that it's government, but government is actually business. The country is actually a business. So we have to realize that the immigration law is based on these following principles. You have to really pay attention to is that it's for the sake of reunification of families, admitting immigrants with skills that are valuable to the U.S. economy, and protecting refugees and promoting diversity. Now, in these areas, if you don't fit these criteria, you're technically not top of the list for who's coming into the U.S. But we kind of got to watch our economy. We're already in a place where our population and the way that the economy is going, we are already in somewhat of a deficit when it comes to funding and what the actual U.S. citizens that we already have in the U.S. are able to receive. And we're lacking funds for individuals and not able to take care of individuals. So if we continue to allow individuals to come into the U.S., we have to be careful. We're only given 675,000 permanent immigrant visas per year. Right. So with that being said, we have to look at who are we going to qualify to come in? Will that be 675,000 individuals who need assistance, or 675 individuals that actually give some form of support or helping to build the economy in the U.S.?
Right. And then also, we lost a listener. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's move forward. Hopefully, she'll join us back. So, Thomas, speaking back on the process, the immigration process. Again, these migrants was out under the bridge, just a whole crowd, large crowd. So they let them stay at the border, and it wasn't until this came out in the news. It wasn't until this image and that photograph appeared in the news and it became outrage. It was days later where they finally established a line to process these people, right? So, a migrant that I saw on the news, they interviewed a migrant, and he said that he was number 10,004. So, which means that they had finally got a process rolling. But it took a few days. It took
Right.
a while for them to figure out how to move forward. So I'm wondering why this wasn't in place and where was the breakdown? Because this administration promised to do better. So I'm wondering where's the breakdown?
Well, we have to think about this rationally. So it's sort of like, okay, no matter how we can't predict what's going to come to the border. You know what I mean? So you get an influx all of a sudden. Okay, you have say we have a camp of 20 individuals that's trying to come across the border. Okay, there's a system in place that would work smoothly for that. But when we're talking about 14,000 individuals or more headed toward the U.S. border, and you don't have that many U.S. border agents that are readily in one location waiting for this type of a crowd. And the last check, I believe it was 4,000 individuals that were stopped at a certain point. In what happened, a portion of them were detained in Mexico, and then some 3,200 remained in custody. And in addition, there's still 1,400 have been flown back to Haiti underneath the U.S. government's Title 42 policy, which is really concerning COVID-19 and the protection of that, from that entering into the country. So when we look at it, they do have some processes, but I believe it was the amount of people at once that's headed in. Please remember, do you remember when Trump was in office? There was a great deal of individuals that were trying to come across the border who were actually a mixture of criminals as well as individuals who were not criminals.
Right.
Those individuals had joined the band of the Haitians, and they have tried to mix in together. Now, if we just open up our border at once and allow individuals to come in and then have a process in place, we've kind of defeated ourselves already, not knowing what we're dealing with. But when we look at the system, I believe it was.
But wait, shouldn't the process include weeding those people out? See, this is what I'm talking about.
And again, we have to think about that. How many border agents do we have in one place at a certain time? And is that sufficient enough to cover some 10,000 individuals that are coming across? And I'm sure you've seen a crowd of people before that are desperate and are in a place of, when you're in a place of desperation, there's no calmness about it. There's no orderly fashion. There's no single file line. It's every man for himself, and there's it's turmoil. So we have to remember that those guys are like, they're already on the front line, and they don't really know how to react to something like that either. And I don't think that there is a specific system we can have in place that can handle such of a large crowd perfectly. Let's say it that way, perfectly, that everyone would look at and smile on at any given time.
Oh, okay. All right, we're rejoined by Alyssa. Let me try to add her. Alyssa, I don't see your screen. Is your camera on?
It actually is on. I'm not sure what's.
Okay, that's okay. You go ahead and put you on. Okay, so since I can hear you, we'll go ahead. Alyssa, so again, we were discussing the process, days later after the photograph came out, it was established a line to process these people, because of course they had to do something because all eyes were on them. So what do you say about the breakdown, like what was going on with, because again, like I stated to Thomas, this administration promised to do better, and I'm wondering where was the breakdown. Hello, can you hear me, Alyssa?
She may have to tap that microphone setting at the bottom. If you tap it, it'll give you the option of different choices to add vocal and video. You might have to try different ones. Actually, it's one in the middle that says cam and microphone. That one, and that may give you, you have to switch it from what you're using to a different one, and then switch back, and it might open it up. It did that for me for my microphone just a few moments ago.
Okay. All right, we'll keep working on it, Alyssa. We'll come back to you. Okay, so Thomas, when you think about it, there's already here in the U.S. in our country, we already have a process when you go to airports, stadiums, and arenas. They have like a line. When you go to the airport, they have signs, they have ropes, to coordinate the flow. And then, also they have people at the ropes or whatever telling you where to go. So there's a system in place to move large crowds in a orderly fashion. So again, I'm still not understanding what is the deal with our immigration office, because it's not like you don't know how to move large crowds. We do it all the time here in the country. So what do you think should happen? You feel heads should roll? They should terminate some people, or should be policy changes, or what?
I believe at some point there will be some form of facility that's actually built near the border of Mexico. I mean, for years and years, since forever, just about, we've had individuals crossing over from Mexico into the U.S. When Trump said he was building a wall, as crazy as it might have seemed because of the length and distance of this wall and trying to stop individuals from coming in, it was somewhat, in so many ways, a thought that was projected in a good direction as far as having some form of order at the border. And I believe eventually they will build some type of a facility that individuals will have to enter through in order to be processed or turned back. And that's going to be a very complicated thing to do because of the amount of distance that border stretch is. And so you have individuals that are coming across for different reasons, and we kind of have to look at what they're facing on the other side. There are those individuals that are gang related, criminals that pass individuals through checkpoints. There's harm that's caused to individuals as they're trying to get into the U.S. So all of these things leave the person to kind of sneak in where they can sneak through, And so there's no real way to secure that amount of space. So in order to really have a system that works, we have to have a pinpoint order, an actual entry point that you can actually set the system up at. And that's what I believe is going to be, the biggest determining factor to changing things coming across the border.
Right. Yeah, you're right, because we do have entry points and we have buildings, but it's insufficient. It's not working. So
Right.
we need a larger space that's more functional. And like I say, do it just like you do the airports and the arenas. I
Right.
mean, it's a no-brainer. We do it all the time. And it's no reason why you can't handle a large crowd. And instead of having the Border Patrol agents on horseback coming out riding with their whips, I'm like, what in the world is this?
Well, this is the only thing they can travel by. In some regions of the border, all you have is places that cannot be accessed by vehicle. So a lot of these guys have to ride horse. Some of these guys are left on station. I actually was hired for Border Patrol at one point. So when I look at Border Patrol, what I saw was they drop you off in location to man the location. So sometimes you don't even have a partner that you're manning the border on. So the real reality is you're kind of left to deal with whatever you're faced with. And you cannot leave that location. So if you leave the location, it's just like AWOL when you're in the military. So this is the same type of situation that they're faced with there. So could you imagine you're there by yourself, or you have one partner with you, and you see a crowd that's large? All you can do is radio someone to tell them to come out and, you know, get some help here as soon as possible. But you're faced with this dilemma by yourself. You're kind of in a situation. I mean, there's no real way for you to just say, this is how I would handle the situation. You know, you're kind of left to fend for yourself.
Okay, well, having heard that scenario and that view, I accept the horseback. But do they have to have the ropes and the whatever you call it, the whip? Some news accounts say it's not a whip. Okay, whatever it is, it's something that they were aiming at just to move the crowd or whatever. So do they need to do that instead of using their mouth and say, go here? You know? Well,
we have to look at what you saw. We have to really see what we saw in that video. While we say, okay, this is a Caucasian male on the back of a horse, and he was swinging something around at a black man that seemed to be a whip. Now, immediately what I was saying, and I'm just trying to play the devil's advocate here, and no pun intended, but I'm just kind of playing the advocate in this position. But let's be real about this. The first thing that triggers the African American community is that, man, this takes me back to the 400 years of my ancestors.
Exactly.
When I see something in that way, right? So it takes away from the reality of what we're seeing also. So I really don't believe in the desperate situation that was there in front of them, what was happening with these individuals. And again, I want to highlight, this was not only Haitian, this was not only the African descent Haitian crowd. These were also Hispanics and different individuals from the South American region. And these individuals, they were all together in one crowd. So you got some that were waiting for their opportunity to come in for different reasons. And so when you saw that, everybody wasn't going to listen to one or two guys on the back of a horse say, stop. One person get in this line, one person get in that line. They saw people that were trying to get past the horses no matter what it took. So they kind of reacted, I believe. I kind of want to say that I believe that they kind of just reacted. It's a human response.
I get it, Thomas, but these are people. They're not sheep. You know what I mean?
I understand.
Yeah, they're not cattle and they're not sheep.
I understand. Now we also have to look at this. As I look at one of the reporters that traveled with this crowd from the BBC News, one of the reporters, they reported that as they traveled through, a lot of the gang members joined them. A lot of the women that were in that large crowd were raped by those individuals. A lot of the individuals were killed by individuals from that crowd. And he actually saw the bodies laying on the ground as they walked in that crowd. So it was a lot of fear in that crowd. It was a lot of different things were happening here. What was to say, and what would have stopped them, or not all of them? I'm just saying the individuals with the mind of, I need to get into the U.S. no matter what. The same individuals that had just killed some of the other immigrants that were peacefully traveling, raped the women that were peacefully traveling. So when we look at that, what was to say that those agents' lives were not at risk? So when you're faced with a crowd, you're kind of faced with the only option of a crowd that's entering in illegally already, that you have to come with some form of authority, some form of force that meets authority. If you don't, then you get overtaken by the crowd as well. So it's a lot of factors that I believe that we have to kind of put into place and think about.
Yeah, I get that, but it's a way to handle it, and they were totally unprepared.
Yeah, I understand. I trust me. I completely understand. When I first saw it, I got some of the same thoughts in my mind as well. And but when you kind of have to step back and say, okay, what would we do in these situations? What would we do if there were 20 individuals or let's say 100 individuals at your front door, and everyone's trying to come through it. And you're telling them, stop, wait, you're trying to talk calmly, but then you notice that they're pushing, sneaking, trying to go through the window. What would be the next move you would make? Would you defend your position? Would you defend the home? Would you stop them at any cost from coming across? I believe that the use of brutal force was not seen. We did not see any brutality, so to speak. We saw a lot of fear factor stuff.
As we know,
intimidation. Yeah, we saw a lot of intimidation. But as far as reports go and what we saw on video, we didn't see anything that was literally, harmful, so to speak. I would say physically. I guess it would be physical damage in some form, or technicality. I guess you would say.
Right. I still say it's no excuse because this is not the first time we had large crowds. So they should have some type of process in place. I don't know if it's laziness or just not taking an effort to revamp it or to do some critical thinking, which it shouldn't take that much critical thinking because, again, we handle large crowds in airports and stadiums every day. So, but let's move on. Both Biden and the Trump administration, and again, this is not political. We're talking about both administrations, so this is just facts. Both the Biden and the Trump administration used the health code called Title 42, and it used the pandemic as a reason to clear out the border as quickly as possible. So these migrants, they're being processed and they're being sent home and deported without even opportunity to request an asylum or put in an application to become a citizen or apply as a refugee. So again, what do you say about that? Because they just quickly deported them. Didn't even give them a reason opportunity to apply or anything.
I believe here we're looking at a situation where America's first. And here's one of those situations where we really have to consider Americans first. And if you realize the amount of lives that we've lost in the U.S. pertaining to COVID-19 and the new variants, we have to really take precaution. And I don't think, with this administration is a different administration. It came in and at a time where there's a lot of scrambling, trying to figure out resources, figure out ways to help Americans from this virus that has killed so many Americans. The previous administration did not use as their number one priority at the time. So I think we have to consider, look, we have to have, as a head of a country or head of a family, the first thing you're going to do is try to protect what's in the house first. Before you can help the world, you really got to get a grip on what's going on in your home, in your country. And that's what I believe is happening with the administration, with Biden's administration. I don't fault him for that. I mean, I really believe that was a good call to try to have something. I mean, who's to say, let's think about this, Rex. Let's think about this. Who's to say some other country didn't plant a new variant in this crowd to pass through into the U.S. border to now give us a totally different issue to deal with and get grip on? It's a lot.
We will continue with our discussion next week.